What is up, MFers, and welcome to the month of October. In today's video, I'm going to tell you all of my top baits for the month of October and exactly where you can go out and have some of the best bass fishing of the year. When we think about October, there's one word that comes to mind that I'm noticing with all my baits right here, and that is the word big. I want my baits to be big. A lot of the forage the bass are eating is big, of course, and I want to reflect that with my baits. But not only is my bait going to be big, October is actually the month where I've caught my biggest bass of the year, a 14.7 pound bass, as well as I think 3 or 4 of my other bass that have been over 13 pounds as well, along with many other double digit and 6, 7, 8+ pound bass. So without further ado, let's learn how to catch them. Before we jump into some of these big, beautiful baits that are right here in front of me, let's talk about what they're actually doing in October. That's more important than anything we could present to the fish. What's happening in October could mean a lot of different things depending on where you're at in the country. Down here in Texas, where I am at, down in Southeast Texas and Houston, I mean, we're finally getting some cooler temperatures this time of year. We're finally getting the cooler, 50s, 60s at night consistently. It's not 100 degrees every day anymore. Hopefully they're starting to get a little bit more into a fall pattern, but further north, I'm from Nebraska in the Midwest. A lot of times the end of October meant like cold. Like I remember it's snowing on Halloween many times and it being downright below zero, not below zero, below freezing and very, very cold. Hopefully not below zero, but you never freaking know up there. I don't think fish think of fall time as like a packing on pounds type of thing. And trying to eat a big meal before winter because they're going to go be dormant in winter. Like that was kind of the old notion, and I completely disagree with that. From what we've seen, I ice fished all the time up north, and bass were extremely active in feeding underneath the ice. And now, of course, the forward-facing sonar, we've seen how active and fast-moving and aggressive these bass can be even in the coldest days of the entire year. I think guys like in the Ozark areas, the Highland area lakes, they knew that all along, but it's something that's really become shocking to me as we get into this month. Now October, I'm not going to just talk about down here in Texas, but a little bit all over. It's not necessarily going to be a month where we get into November and December where I'm going to really start picking up a jerkbait and fishing really slow for kind of slower types of cold front style bites. But it's a month when fish, I think, are really moving and they're setting up on different pieces of cover to account for that temperature change. And by this time of year, we're not talking about a turnover anymore or algae blooms or fishing pressure really making it an issue and causing fish to set up in weird locations and not bite very good. Actually, we're talking about the opposite because most people that fish, it seems like, also hunt. I'm not one of them. And so you really get the water to yourself a lot of times. That's one of my favorite things about fall fishing. So let's run through some of these patterns and areas, and I'll show you the exact baits I like for those areas. One area I really like for this time of year is going to be secondary points. It makes total sense. Fish coming, fish going, shad movement, but really fish use secondary points all year long. It's nothing crazy, but if I can find, especially on a bigger body of water, a place where you can pattern fish, a big reservoir, secondary points are going to be really easy to find. But you might not have necessarily areas with big traditional secondary points. If you have smaller bodies of water that you're fishing, I even fish some smaller bodies of water that are under 2,000 or 3,000 acres where you really just have like those big flatter round points. But really it doesn't matter where I'm at in the country, the depth range I'm focusing on is gonna vary depending on the lake, but I'm usually looking for something in like the 8 to 20 foot range. I know that's a pretty big difference, but and really if you're not fishing a super deep lake, you can really focus on like 8 to 15 feet. That should really narrow some things down for you guys. But what I'm looking for is areas where I'm gonna go to creeks where I'm seeing a lot of shad activity and bait fish activity. It's not necessarily going to be, falling around bait balls or falling fish to the back of the creek, but more so just being in areas where there's a lot of life present. That's the areas I like to look for in these transition months because the big bass are going to be around. They might not necessarily, again, be under a bait ball or blowing up top water or making it really obvious where they've moved to. But in October, man, they can really get on a lot of different types of cover on those secondary points. That might be a dock, that might be a brush pile, that might be some grass, but really, I mean, I'm not looking for those super deep areas where it's a big offshore piece of cover or structure. I'm not looking for those quite yet. I'll get there in some of the winter stuff, and we talked about some of that with the summer stuff, but we're talking about in between transition zones. And of course, there's times when you can fish those bait ball fish, those topwater fish in the back of the creeks, or maybe even they're schooling out in the middle and you can catch a million small ones. That's not what I like to do. I don't like to go out and try to catch a bunch of 1-pounders when I know there's 10-pounders living in the lake. Hopefully that makes some sense to you guys. Ways that I like to target those secondary points. I'm gonna start generally with a moving bait, and it's gonna really depend on, you know, what type of cover is on that secondary point. If I have a dock or a brush pile, those are kind of vertical types of cover where I think of them as a place that the fish can release up off of to a bait that's going over it. On a horizontal plane, they're gonna come up more vertically. Obviously, you know, they can do that on other pieces of cover, but I really think that way when I'm talking brush piles, docks, anything with a lot of deep water under it or near it is where those fish can release up and come off of. And that requires a different type of bait. What I like to throw in those situations, I mean, I'm always gonna start with a big glide bait, see if I can get them to react to a big glide, because this is the time of year, you know, up until winter into the spring when some of the bait fish get big. Even if you live in a threadfin shad lake, you know, it's not uncommon to see a 5-6 inch threadfin shad. That's not much different profile than this 6-inch draw right here. And of course, if you got gizzards, this isn't even a big gizzard shad profile, but I've caught so many, you know, big bass on these two baits right here. So really, I'll throw these two baits over the top of brush piles. I'll fish them down the sides of docks, especially, you know, again, you don't want to just fish random docks, but docks that have a lot of things going for them, like a dock that's in a creek with a lot of bait fish and it's on a point, a dock that has a brush pile nearby, the dock that has the most shade that it's giving off. And really, that's something that you need to think about as well, is docks, you know, tend to have fish that hold a little bit tighter, a little bit closer to them. Same with brush piles. As the day gets going a little bit longer, get the sun on it, they're not roaming quite as much, and these two baits right here, I mean, that's gonna be absolutely killer. Another option for these brush piles, of course, another big bait is the spoon. Man, I love throwing a spoon in and around brush piles. If you got forward-facing sonar, obviously, you know, you can feather this over the top of them. If you don't, you're gonna have to get used to figuring out the sink rate of a 6-cent spoon like this guy right here. This is the perfect size to me. It's not that super magnum size, but it's bigger than your traditional 6-inch spoon. And the good thing about it is it's heavy enough. A lot of you guys know, I mean, if you get snagged in a brush pile, don't freaking sit there and rip on it really hard. Just, you know, simply try to feather it out, and if that doesn't work, get right over the top of it and shake it. Usually the weight of this big blade here, this chunk of metal, will shake that guy free. So that's an option that's really good for me. We're gonna talk a little bit more about this in a second, but the old bodega, this new bodega bait on a free rig, on a shaky head, and we're gonna talk about it on the back of a jig here in a second. Absolutely killer this time of year around brush piles, even around docks. Great bait with a big profile that's gonna get the biggest fish in the area to come bite. Now, the second type of secondary point or kind of a big flat that comes out into a creek with life, a lot of activity going on. I'm just gonna be fishing bare bottom areas, rock piles, hard spots, creek channel bends that there's a hard spot up on top of. Of course, those are good spots all year long, but in October, again, a transition month where the fish are moving in, out, chasing bait, and the bait's really moving a lot. These are some of the baits that I like to fish on more of a clean bottom situation or a hard bottom situation. First one I'm gonna throw, again, I wanna start with a moving bait, 6-cents hangover. This is my guy right here. I love this thing. Imitates gizzards, thread fins, but especially on some of these like 8 to 12, 15 foot deep flats, those gizzards seem to really get up there, really get active later in the daytime. That's when this guy can be really effective, or in low light situations as well. You know, get out there in the tournament, first few casts in the morning, first cast I'm gonna make on any spot this time of year is probably gonna be with this bait right here, because it's gonna get the big one to come up and eat. It might pull the entire school if they're 2-pounders. That's fine, because, you know, we talk about this a lot. A lot of times the 2-pounders, a big group will be following it, and then it'll come up to like an 8-10 pounder, and that one will come up and lose its mind and eat it, just from the fact that it was drawing that many fish. Another bait that I'm definitely gonna be throwing and grinding into these spots, and don't think of it so much, you know, this is that new bait right here, the unit from 6-cents. Don't think of it as like, oh, it dives to 25, 30 feet, so you can only use it if it's 23 or 4 feet or deeper. That's not true at all. This is gonna be a bait where you can fish it, you know, up to 10 feet deep and really stop and go retrieve, be super aggressive with it, and it's gonna cause a reaction strike a lot more than a more natural bait like the Hangover right here. Hangover, I mean, I've caught them in muddy water with it too, but anything, you know, 2-foot visibility up to I mean, as clean as you want to go. Hangover's gonna be really good. This guy can be really good in the off-colored, you know, really dirty stained water, or just in, I mean, even ultra clear water, a place where you need to get a reaction strike out of the fish where they're used to seeing little tiny baits or really natural baits, can be an absolute killer as well. Another bait I like to throw this time of year is I like to drag something real big, and that's generally going to be a jig with a really big trailer. This is a 6 Sense Divine 3/4 ounce jig. I love this thing because it sits flat on the bottom, just like a football jig does. It has that nice rocking motion. You know, it catches on the bottom. It's gonna pop that craw up in a defensive posture, but it also has like a pointed nose as well. So it comes through brush really well. It comes through grass pretty well. It's just a great all-around jig. It's one that I don't have to have 30 types of jig in my box when I have this guy right here. And again, I'm gonna take this same bodega, I'm gonna match up the jig to it. And I caught a lot of freaking giants on this last year. We'll thread this bad guy on here. I'm going fishing tomorrow. I'm going to tie this guy up right now because that thing is a killer. All this flow back here. I remember I showed a video of this to Davey Height when I was with him last winter, and he's like, that's a mop jig bait right there. And he's damn right. I mean, from somebody that's won maybe millions of dollars on a mop jig, it was cool to hear that, but the flow, the naturalism, hopping, dragging of this trailer right here, gonna be money. I'm just gonna leave him right there so I don't forget him for the morning. And then one more presentation. Of course, I don't go anywhere these days without having a jig head minnow tied on. You'd be stupid not to, but I don't know if these are released yet. I would assume they're not, but we got the 6 Sense Shindo in the big some bitch version right there. I don't think it's probably out yet, but this is gonna be a very special bait for those of you guys that have kind of caught onto that technique that I told you this off season was gonna be the biggest technique this year. I think it did end up being the biggest kind of splash technique that kind of broke out as far as tournament wins went. It's only getting better. That's a 7-inch minnow. You know, I fish it on like a 3/0 hook. I got a million different hooks that I make my own jig heads here. Generally, you know, the Gamakatsu 10111 hook, I'll pour like a 4/0 in that for this guy, and like an 1/8 ounce to a 3/16 ounce jig head. Usually not up to a quarter because I want that slower fall and that big wavy motion as it rolls. Strolling this bait and not necessarily throwing an individual fish. You know, that's a real big misconception is guys are just going out firing and floating blobs, but firing this thing out over the backside of a school or a group of fish, fishing it 6 inches to 2 feet off the bottom and just strolling, twitch it down, twitch it up. If it's a little bit deep, if it's a little bit shallower, you can twitch it up, but I like to twitch it with my rod tip down. And I mean, I've caught already, you know, 12-inch fish on this big bait right here. They have no problem sucking that minnow in, so you better get to freaking figuring that out. And the good thing is you can fish it on the Milliken rods that are on the website. That 6/8 light fishes this really well, actually. You don't need a giant rod to throw that, so keep an eye on that as well. Last but not least, this time of year is one of my favorite times to fish the last type of cover on those secondary points or those transition style areas, and that is grass. Especially down here in Texas, we got a ton of hydrilla, we've got a ton of milfoil, and there's some definite options I like to throw that are deadly, that again fit that big profile. I love to catch them on top water even this time of year, and you'll be surprised those fish will eat top water all the way with the water going down into the 50s, so don't be afraid to throw it. But this big 6 Sense catwalk, this Magnum catwalk that is, it's got a good mixture of that hard knocker rattle and then little tiny BBs in it, and it just pulls fish. You guys saw me catch so many big ones on this on my summer trip, and this probably is the best time to throw this thing, honestly, is the fall time. That's when I love to throw this thing. And the reason for that being, again, the bait fish are big, but a lot of times there's just, you know, an overwhelming amount of bait fish in an area, and some of the threadfin, you know, if they're grouped up, they're balled up, are still gonna be that smaller size in a lot of bodies of water. This bait will stand out and get you that bite. Instead of matching the hatch, fishing this over the top of some of that grass when there's a gap in between it or down the edge of it, down the sides of it, is a very traditional fall pattern that is deadly for catching giant fish. Fall is probably the time of the year when you can catch your biggest topwater fish of the year, in my opinion, so don't sleep on this bait right here. Moving down a little bit into the water column, fishing those grass edges, fishing, you know, taking the tops of that grass, this is a great bait for it as well. Again, you're fishing a gizzard shad, threadfin shad profile bait. This 6 Cents Trace is one that comes in all different, you know, I like it because it comes in 3 different sink rates. So you can have that floater, fish it up really high within 6 inches of the surface like you do that topwater bait, but a little bit more natural, a little bit quieter. Or there's a slow sink, which you can fish a nice slow clip and, you know, a foot over the top of the grass when there's not much clearance there. Or the fast sink, which you can get it down and cover a ton of water with. Another good thing is with the fast sink, just think of it as a bait where you can just fish it a lot faster and maintain that same position in the water column. So even if you're catching fish where there's, you know, a 2-foot gap over the top of some of that hydrilla, that milfoil, with the slow sink, you're gonna get a steady clip. You know, the floater, of course, is gonna work really slow over the top. But that fast sink, you can burn quick, burn, stop and go retrieve, really erratic action. And this thing's caught a ton of double digits over the years since it got released. So keep an eye on that. And then last but not least, my favorite moving bait presentation for getting down in the grass, bogging it up. No one's gonna be surprised. The old bladed jig, it's just a staple year round around grass. We used to kind of think of it a little bit more as a pre-spawn bait, cold water pre-spawn bait. But the bladed jig, of course, has shown its value 365 days of the year, not 100 days a year, but you can catch a fish about on these things anytime, and October is great for it. I'm really excited to get out and throw this some more. I've already caught a bunch of fish on it, but this new 6 Cents chatterbait trailer called the Jigsaw. Also, I think there'll be some other presentations that we haven't really tried yet with it that'll be really good, whether that be on a scrounger head, a spinnerbait trailer, something like that. But this bait is going to be an absolute killer on the back of a bladed jig. It's called the Jigsaw. It'll be out very soon if it's not already out. And it pairs really well with this really rusty hook on this chatterbait. There it is on the back of that chatterbait. Just a really good profile. And yeah, that thing's going to get absolutely chewed. A lot of great action with it. If you look at it right there, nice limp style, but it's actually kind of a tougher plastic. There's not salt built into it. So I think it'll be like a really durable chatterbait trailer as well. Regardless, it's going to allow your bait to hunt. It's going to give a ton of subtle motion back there, and that's going to be a damn winner. Comment down below, let me know your favorite baits for the month of October, what you guys like to throw. And if you have any questions about any of the rods, reels, gear, baits that I talked about in this video, drop a comment down below. Some of these baits, like I said, have not been released yet. I'll have a better idea the next couple weeks when this video comes out and we start talking, when those baits will be released, so you guys can go out and get them. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you want to see more tip videos like this, and don't be afraid to comment what video you want to see next. All right, Mavers, I'm out of here. Peace.
I'm sorry.